Peruvian social organizations resumed massive protests to demand the resignation of President Dina Boluarte, the holding of early general elections, and the release of former President Pedro Castillo. In Cuba, the U.S. Embassy resumed visa and consular services in Havana. And in Somalia, the death toll following two car bomb explosions rose to 35. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Social and political organizations in Peru continue their protests to demand early elections and the creation of a constituent assembly. The General Confederation of Workers of Peru, CGTP, called its capital city bases to a march this afternoon in solidarity with the southern regions, which are aiming at a general strike. The CGTP gave its support to demands for prompt elections, the resignation of Dina Boluarte, and change of Congress leadership, and a referendum to find whether or not the people want a constituent assembly. After the removal and imprisonment of former President Pedro Castillo last December 7th, demonstrations were registered in several regions of Peru that left a total of 26 people dead by police repression.
Unfortunately, we again had to come to this situation of paralyzing more than half of the country, not so much in the south, but in the north and in the center. The country is paralyzed, and we know that this has consequences, especially if we are in a state of emergency that was predicted some time ago. It did not bring good results. There is no solution, and this will continue with the risk that more human lives will continue to be lost, more people's blood spilled, I repeat, due to the incapacity of the political class that governs the country today.
In Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Bolivia, political violence by Luis Fernando Camacho's followers persists while most of the country is in calm. Local media have highlighted the willingness of both private and state companies to remain in operation despite the demonstrations of groups demanding the governor's release. The authorities underlined the peaceful vocation of the majority of the population, which did not join the call of the extremist sectors. On Wednesday, Colombia's National Liberation Army, or ELN by Spanish acronym, issued a statement saying no ceasefire agreement has yet been reached with the administration of Gustavo Petro. Although on December 31st, President Petro announced on his Twitter account a decree regarding a bilateral ceasefire agreement with the ELN, now his administration is calling it off. Colombia's Interior Minister Alfonso Prada said in a press conference that the government has decided to call off the decree until the negotiating table resumes in the coming days. Still, the Interior Minister insisted on the need for a truce to curtail violence in the territories affected by the conflict. On Wednesday, Argentina marks the one-year anniversary of the Atlanticazo, an environmental mobilization that tried to make the serious consequences of the seismic exploration visible. Protest activities will take place in different cities of the country, while the Argentinian government advances in the authorization of seismic exploration by foreign companies. Demonstrations aim to show the popular rejection of a recent decision made by the Federal Court of Appeals of Mar del Plata to annul a precautionary measure preventing offshore exploration. The court considered that both the Argentinian government and the Norwegian company Equinor, one of the exploiting companies, had complied with the requested requirements to carry out the activity. On Wednesday, residents of Mexicaltongo, a town located north of Mexico City, protested a fire at a spring in the municipality of Jilotepeque. The population had been complaining for weeks about a persistent smell of gasoline when a water well in the community caught fire and began to spit thick black smoke. The state company Petróleos Mexicanos has not commented on the situation, but there is suspicion that gasoline might have leaked into the local aquifers. The municipal president of Jilotepeque, Rodolfo Nogues, said on Monday night that Pemex authorities had agreed to visit the spring to investigate the fire in 1993. A series of sewer explosions affected a 50-block area in Guadalajara, killing at least 220 people. Investigators later determined that the explosion had been caused by gasoline that had escaped from a subway pipe into the sewer system. In Cuba, the U.S. Embassy resumed visa and consular services in Havana. Local media said the reopening could help Cuban citizens to travel to the United States in a safe, legal, and orderly manner. The embassy began to gradually expand services and diplomatic staff on a limited basis in May 2022. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez acknowledged the resumption of visa processing as a decision in the right direction. The official pointed out that the measure does not yet contemplate the non-immigrant visas that would allow family visits as well as cultural, sports, and scientific exchanges. The Cuban Foreign Ministry assured that migration through safe and legal channels is a mutual objective of both nations, while blaming the sanctions imposed by the U.S. against the island for the departure of tens of thousands of citizens. Let's listen to what some Cubans have to say about the resumption of migratory services in the U.S. Embassy in Havana.
Very well and happy for me and for all of us in this situation because we really care a lot and we're filled with anxiety just thinking about going to another country so far away, the amount that costs for the Cuban family.
The possibility of access to migratory services from the Embassy of the United States in Havana until this moment is officially inaugurated, and from 2017, Cubans had to go to a third country, first to Colombia and then to Georgetown, Guyana, in order to access, for example, the possibility of reunification with family members through the Family Reunification Program.
Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The last of the faithful to pay their respects to Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI filed past his body in St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday, among them cardinals, bishops, and religious leaders and political delegations from around the world. Later Wednesday, Vatican officials were to place Benedict's body in a cypress coffin, the first of 3 coffins, along with a brief written summary of his historic papacy, the coins minted during his pontificate, and his pallium stalls. After the funeral in the piazza, the remains will be carried back into the basilica, where the coffin will be placed inside a zinc one, and then finally into another made from oak. In keeping with Benedict's wishes, his remains will be placed in the crypt once occupied by the tomb of St. John Paul II in the grottos underneath the basilica. John Paul's tomb was moved upstairs into the main basilica ahead of his 2011 beatification. The United Kingdom will return to Greece some pieces of the Elgin marbles from the Parthenon in Athens as part of a cultural exchange after the British Museum and the Acropolis Museum in Athens closed the restitution deal. According to the Parthenon project, a body shared by Ed Waisey, a former British culture minister, the term cultural exchange would circumvent a British law that prevents the London institution from dismantling its impressive collection. At the same time, the British Museum would continue to display magnificent pieces of Greek art as a museum of the world. In recent decades, Greek governments have intensified their demands for London to return the pieces. British authorities claim that the sculptures were legally acquired in 1802 by British diplomat Lord Elgin, who sold them to the British Museum, but Greece claims they were looted while the country was under Ottoman occupation. Russian President Vladimir Putin had announced his willingness to hold a telephone conversation on Wednesday with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss issues of common interest. Just an intention was confirmed by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who noted that the talk had been requested by the Turkish president. The two leaders are set to address issues concerning bilateral relations and the current situation in Eastern Europe. Ankara intends to get the presidents of both Russia and Ukraine to agree on a deal regarding energy exports to Europe, very similar to the grain corridor deal signed months ago. On Wednesday, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that a frigate sent to active duty armed with new hypersonic Circon cruise missiles will head to the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, as well as the Mediterranean Sea.
This ship, armed with zircons, is capable of inflicting pinpoint and powerful strikes against the enemy at sea and on land. The feature of hypersonic missiles is the ability of reliably get around any modern advanced air defense systems or missile defense systems. The main efforts of the frigate's crew will concentrate on countering threats against Russia, maintaining regional peace and stability jointly with friendly countries. During the exercises and training, the crew will practice the use of hypersonic weapons and long-range cruise missiles in various conditions.
On Wednesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with President of the Philippines Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in Beijing, pledging efforts to make a comprehensive plan for the future development of bilateral relations. She expressed the hope that both sides will maintain regular and strategic communication and remain committed to becoming good neighbors that help each other, good relatives that share mutual understanding and close bonds, and good partners that pursue cooperation and win-win results. For his part, Marcos said he is looking forward to maintaining close communication with President Xi and strengthening cooperation in all aspects to open a new chapter in a comprehensive strategic cooperative relationship between the Philippines and China. Following the meeting, the two heads of state witnessed the signing of cooperation documents on the Belt and Road Initiative, agriculture and fisheries, infrastructure, finance, customs, e-commerce, and tourism. On Wednesday, China said it hoped countries would focus on fighting COVID-19 itself, avoiding politicization, after the United States once again called for transparency from Beijing on virus infection data as the country sees a widespread surge in cases.
We also know that many people said that if the U.S. hadn't politicized the pandemic at the very onset but responded responsibly with an attitude of putting life first like what the Chinese government did, I'm afraid that the COVID-19 situation both within the U.S. and worldwide wouldn't have developed as it has today. We sincerely hope that all parties will focus on fighting COVID-19 itself, avoid politicization on the virus issue, strengthen solidarity and work together to prevail over COVID-19 as soon as possible.
Likewise, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning commented on the newly released assessment made by the International Atomic Energy Agency on Japan's plan to discharge nuclear-contaminated water into the sea, and said Japan's unilateral push for the program was reckless and irresponsible.
The discharge of nuclear-contaminated water isn't a private matter for Japan. We once again urge Japan to pay attention to the legitimate and reasonable demands of the international community, fully consult with its neighboring countries, Pacific Island countries, and other stakeholders and relevant international agencies, and effectively dispose of the water in an open, transparent, scientific, and safe manner, and accept the strict supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In central Somalia on Wednesday, the attack was perpetrated in Mahas in the province of Iran, and most of the deceased were civilians. According to local media, the terrorist group Al-Shabaab could be behind the events, as the organization has carried out numerous attacks against government troops, the African Union mission in Somalia, and UN humanitarian operations. This group has also claimed responsibility for several terrorist incidents in neighboring East African countries, including a massacre in Nairobi, Kenya in September 2013. On Monday, the Humanitarian Center for Rights and Development released a report stating that during last year's war in Yemen, the total number of casualties surpassed the 3,000s. The published number includes the death of 640 wounded. The report also adds that the Saudi-led coalition airstrikes on Yemen killed 102 children during 2022. As for the damage to Yemen's infrastructure, the report mentions the attacks have destroyed over 14,000 homes, 134 hospitals, among other vital areas. The aggression also destroyed 22 power stations, 46 communication towers and stations, and 974 roads and bridges. In Palestine, Israel's army demolished 5 homes, water tanks, and olive orchards in 2 villages in the southern West Bank, where residents are at risk of imminent expulsion. According to images shared by local residents and activists, the military's heavy machinery moved through the West Bank with bulldozers, razing homes, animal pens, and cisterns, while dumping people's property over the cold desert. Both villages, Tel Ma'in and Shab al-Butum, are within Area C and under full Israeli military control. Most residents of the area known as Masafer Yatta have remained in place since the ruling, even as Israeli security forces periodically roll in to demolish structures. However, they could be forced out at any time. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered on Wednesday a review to suspend the military agreement with his northern neighbor in case of another military incident. The Korean president ordered to consider suspending the September 19, 2018 agreement if North Korea carries out what he called another provocation by invading South Korean territory. It further ordered the establishment of a joint drone unit to perform multi-purpose missions such as surveillance, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare, as well as the establishment of a system that can mass-produce small drones that are difficult to detect. The military agreement in place is intended to avoid accidental military confrontations between the two nations, establishing a security perimeter in which military actions are prohibited. The navies of Russia, China, and South Africa will conduct 10 days of naval maneuvers in the Indian Ocean off the South African coast. The South African National Defence Force said the drills will be held off South Africa's coastal province of KwaZulu-Natal from February 17th to the 24th. This year, the drills are expected to cover the area from the city of Durban to Richards Bay, which are separated by 160 kilometers. The South African Department of Defense announced that according to preliminary plans, the exercise will involve 2 Russian warships. In particular, the drills include artillery, force protection, and air defense practices. Red Freedom is the title of the artistic act that united a group of Syrian and Lebanese singer-songwriters at the Opera House in Damascus to pay tribute to the memory of the martyrs of the Syrian Arab Army, friendly countries and allies who sacrificed their lives in defense of Syria against terrorism and its sponsors. Let's see.
The collective interpretation, Red Freedom, ratified the solidity of the closed eyes that unite the member countries of the Axis of Resistance, materialized their millenary civilized culture that resisted the terrorist attempts to erase it, and reflected their deep appreciation for the sacrifices suffered by their troops in the battle waged by Syria and its allies against terrorism, occupation, and foreign military intervention.
Music plays a human, cultural, and educational role, and this has been the message that we have always carried through our artistic work that never stopped, even in the most critical years of the war.
Today we share this loyalty with all the brothers and friends that the blood of their martyrs have been mixed with the blood of our martyrs on the Syrian soil, where they sacrificed their life to free this land from terrorism.
Syrian and Lebanese singer-songwriters also gave individual interpretations of patriotic songs that, like the song Red Freedom, made the public vibrate in an atmosphere of unity and enthusiasm, marked by the defiance of Western plans against the brotherly countries of the resistance bloc.
Art carries a message of love that unites people and enlightens hearts, and we hope that our message will reach people all over the world with love, for there is nothing more beautiful than this human feeling, and today we honor this love by paying tribute to those martyred heroes of the Syrian Arab Army. I was invited to participate in this work, and I really welcomed the idea of transmitting this message of unity and loyalty to the whole world, especially from the capital of the Arab civilization, Damascus.
Today we honor the memory of the martyrs of our homeland, and by doing so, we show that we remain united in defense of the homeland and fighting to overcome the common suffering that we endure, and therefore I am very proud to participate in this activity and this outstanding artistic work.
Art is one of the means by which Syrians show the world the true image of a country that managed to defy the plans of those who believed that by instituting a policy of terror, they could erase their millenary cultural identity. This musical gala, like many other artistic demonstrations, is a clear example of this reality.
Hisham Wannous, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.